As I said to Sam, there's today's guest, I actually feel as I was preparing for this conversation, I actually thought I had a better understanding about the future generation of our workforce. Because I'm quite interested in whole Generation Z, Y, and all that, and the needs of them, because I think it's quite important as a business leader to understand how do we actually prepare for the future and make your business attractive for talent in a way. And now how do you actually unlock their potential? And as I was going through this and preparing for the conversation with Sam, I actually found out, humbly, I must say, I'm not sure I totally both understand the next generation and how do I actually make sure that I actually support and help them in the best possible way when they hit the job market, and how can I be involved in making sure they're ready for the job market, because going and getting a job is a totally different expectation than what we expected them to up in their early 20s and how they live life with social media and so on. So with that said, welcome to the show, Sam. And I'm sure you can help us unbox some of that or give us some guidance and direction on how we unleash the potential of our future generations.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me along, and we'll certainly give that a go today. We'll try and answer your questions as best we can.
And Sam, for people that want to understand the context of this conversation, could you talk a bit about like your journey and what got you to set up Inspire Community Group, which is I don't know, it's not a social enterprise, it's a CIC, so I don't know how you position yourself in that way, or nonprofit, but talk a bit about that journey and how you started set up that, and then we can dive into the more specific of the work you've been doing.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Michael. So a CIC, start with that, is a community interest company. It's basically a hybrid between a limited company and a charity. So we can have the benefits of the work that we do in a charitable sense. So we can apply for trust and foundation funding, and we can fundraise like a charity would. But we can also raise funds commercially. The idea is that the work that we do is for the good of the community and not for the good of a board of directors or for one individual, for example. So if the organization was to close at some point, for example, the funds that would be left after all your debtors are paid would go to another charity. It wouldn't go to the board of directors as a limited company would. So it's there for the good of the community and for the good of the work that what you do. So that's the role of the CIC. We're a legal entity, as any other organisation is. We are on Companies House. We pay tax. We have to pay our fees to Companies House and His Majesty's Revenue, etc. So we're a legal and legitimate company with a Companies House number, etc. But it's just a different way of working with as well. So yeah, that's the CIC. How we got here. Well, my journey started way back at school. Had a real keen interest in food and cooking. Done some work experience whilst I was at school. I worked in a pub on a Sunday, peeling potatoes, learning how to make Yorkshire pudding with a really passionate female chef called Doreen, who was married to an absolute mad Frenchman in the pub. The Frenchman was in charge of the bar and was drunk most of the time, but Doreen was this amazing chef and took me under her wing and taught me some of the basic stuffs in the kitchen. And she always remembers, she took me to Billingsgate Fish Market really early one Saturday morning. I must have been 14, 15, and was just absolutely blown away by the hustle, the bustle, the fish, the excitement. And it wasn't even 5 a.m. in the morning, and we'd almost done our day's work, and was just thought, I've just got to work in this industry and in some way or another, and got really excited by it. I then done a 2 weeks work experience at the Honourable Society of the Middle Temple, and that really confirmed that working in hospitality was a career that I wanted to do, and was really inspired by the people I met at that early age. I then done an apprenticeship in hospitality as a chef at 16, worked for Forte Hotels. It was a Forte Crest. We done everything from silver service through to fine dining there at Forte, and done a day release to college to get my MVQs, as they was back then. Roll on a little bit, done my level 3, then went front of house, done a trainee management program, ended up being a restaurant and bars, and then restaurant and banqueting manager at that hotel, duty management, and then done some placements in other hotels within the Forte group. And Forte, working for a big company like that, were really good because they recognised you, they looked after you, and they put you around various different properties so you could learn from each other, and learn from the best that they had. They developed a really good customer service program called Commitment to Excellence, and I ended up being a trainer for that. And that's what really got me excited about training and development. I then left Forte when it got taken over by Granada and ITV, and moved into the independent hotel, a hotel in Blackheath called the Clarendon, where I was food and restaurant and bars manager there, and also looked after banqueting, so basically in charge of food and beverage. There was only 3 managers at that hotel, the general manager, the deputy manager, and myself, and we basically run that hotel. Our busiest day of the year was the London Marathon, because obviously that's where it starts. So that was our Christmas, was the marathon period. We had steel bands outside playing, and just absolutely brilliant. But my passion for training really was able to come to the fruition there, because they had no real training program in place. I was able to bring in an apprenticeships provider. I brought in various different learning and development modules, really focusing on guest service and customer service. And being an independent hotel, we was head office. We designed everything ourselves, and I absolutely loved that time, working everything from the bottom up, really. I then went into actually apprenticeships, left operations and went into apprenticeships in the hospitality industry, and was an MVQ assessor, going around learning, teaching apprenticeships to the next generation of up and coming talent, and really, really enjoyed that. That then introduced me to Springboard, the Springboard charity. Really liked the work that they done, trained as a Springboard ambassador, and thought, this is something that I really feel passionate about, is that whole going into schools, showcasing our industry. I then managed to get a job at Springboard as activities coordinator for London and the South East, and ended up there after 13 years being business relations and careers director for Springboard. So I was there for 13 years and worked on some amazing programs at Springboard, everything from the big ticket items like Future Chef, Career Scope, the careers magazines, introduced things like our gate gossip, where we used to take parents who would gossip at the gate, take them, put them on a bus, and take them into the hospitality industry so they could see the world of work, and then take them back so they could continue the gate gossip for when their little kids finish school at the end of the day. Programs like that were really exciting and really good initiatives. I then worked on a big program with Springboard called the Big Hospitality Conversation. And we worked with organisations like the British Hospitality Association, which is now obviously UK Hospitality, Whitbread, Accor, Hilton, big brands, DWP, and apprenticeship providers. And the Big Hospitality Conversation was all about bringing business leaders, young people and job seekers around the tables and having a conversation about the world of work and about the world of hospitality and careers in it. And as a result of those big conversations, we got employers to pledge for work experience, apprenticeships and jobs. And as a result, that then got listened to by government. And we actually done 2 at City Hall in London with the mayor, who was at the time Boris Johnson, who went on to do something else. I'm not too sure what, but he was the mayor of London at the time, and he was actually involved, and his deputies, and we hosted 2 big conversations at City Hall. So it was really, really powerful stuff. But I'd done 13 years at Springboard and decided to move then back into apprenticeships, and went and worked for an organisation called Umbrella Training, where I was their business relations director. And at the time, Umbrella was fairly young. It had only been going for a few years. Its main clients were estate agents. They had a few hospitality businesses, but we came in and we really captured the luxury hospitality market. And this was a time when apprenticeships were going through a wholesale change reform. So they were going from standard frameworks to standards, and the levy was introduced. So the way I described it to people was, it's like learning to drive all over again, driving on the left to driving on the right overnight, and everything was changing, but the destination was still the end goal was the same. So our role really there was to really introduce employers to about those changes of how to navigate that pathway, explaining what the standards were, explaining how to use levy, and getting employers to trust us with their money, because they was paying the tax and they could choose which providers they wanted to spend their levy with. So I done that for 5 years, and by the time I left there, we had a whole range of luxury 5-star branded hotels, businesses with us, and the likes of the Pig, which was our first client outside of the London M25 bubble. So really, really exciting times. Then obviously the pandemic came. My plan was to open a business in Norfolk to run a small bed and breakfast type place, move the family out of London and, live the dream and potter away making coffee and tea and cakes all day. Unfortunately, that never happened. We got gazumped, basically. So it was back to the drawing board. I had no job, was unemployed. So I got a job with Ocado and was a home delivery driver, driving a van during the pandemic, delivering shopping. And I must say, Michael, I absolutely loved it. It was probably one of the best jobs I've ever done. I was not anybody. I had no name. I was Sam Coulstock and a number. I can't even remember my number, but I was a number. And you was known by your call sign, your number. I didn't have a boss. I just used to go to the manager's desk if I had an issue or needed to speak to somebody. But I was just driving a van. I wasn't very good, by the way, Michael, I must admit. It wasn't my best job. I was the first one out the gate in the morning and the last one back at night, because I was just so slow at it. I just couldn't get my head round it. But I had good customer service scores, and
you're probably talking with the customers more than the others.
Exactly. Yeah. And I used to take care. I used to deliver it with care. We get a card and sometimes it's just shoved in the doorstep and they're gone. But I used to, have a chat to the old ladies at the doorstep, and it would, anyway. So I was doing that. I'd done that for about 8 months. I got a phone call then from Robert Richardson from the Institute of Hospitality. He just took over as chief executive, and he said, Sam, look, my head of professional development has just retired. Would you be interested in joining the Institute as head of professional development? And, I thought, wow, it's a too good of an opportunity to turn down, really. So said, yes, absolutely, I'd like to apply. So applied for the role, was lucky enough to secure that job. And I've been there for the last 3.5 years at the Institute, and I left at the end of January. In the interim period, whilst all of that was going on, whilst I was at Ocado, I was setting up Inspired. So whilst I was looking for a job, I was really looking for something that could bring my skills together and my passion of young people showcasing the industry, changing those perceptions of the careers in our sector, and bring and a tool to be able to do that. And I was aware of an organisation in Norfolk again called Be Inspired, and Be Inspired done some great work with schools in Norfolk and Norwich. And they used to win Springboard Awards for excellence, and that's where I got to know them. So I reached out to them during the pandemic and said, look, guys, are you still doing your work up in Norfolk? Could I do a franchise of what you're doing, but down here in London? And they said, Sam, that'd be brilliant. We'd love you to do that, but we don't do it anymore. We folded the business up a few years ago. But what I do is I help people set up social enterprises. And why don't you set your own social enterprise up and do this yourself? And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. I went away and thought about it and came back and actually, yeah, this would be a really good idea. Actually, I know the school sector. I know the industry. We can certainly merge the two together. So a chap called Robert Whitwood, he was one of the founding directors of Inspired, and myself, and a chap who I think has been on your podcast before, a chap called John Reed, from Paddy and Scott's. The three of us set Inspired up with 3 directors. Robert left after 12 months. He said he'd only do a year, and he'd done a year. But he helped us get all our governance in place, our bank accounts in place, and all the logistical bits that you need to be a CIC. And Robert was great because without his advice and guidance and about how a CIC works and how you set up a social enterprise, we wouldn't be here today. So we were really in debt to Robert's advice and guidance from the early days. And that was 5 years ago. So we're coming up to our 5th birthday in November. And that's where we are today. So I'm now full-time in Inspired, working. We've got the foundations in place. Our plan is now to build and get bigger and do what we can to really make a difference.
What is the big problem you're solving as a organization, you would say?
The big problem our industry faces is a perception issue amongst young people and their influencers. So influencers are their parents, teachers, media, social media, about where they can progress once they leave school. The other big issue young people face is they just don't know what options to take when they're 16. So they know now that they have to be in education till they're 18. But at 16, they can make a choice of what that education looks like. They can go and do A-levels at sixth form. They can go and do an apprenticeship. They could go and do T-levels. They could go to college. Or they could look at doing work and doing work-based learning. So there's so many options for them to take. And quite often, and sadly, because of funding with the schools will only give them the option of sixth form because they want to keep as many students as they can in school because that means more money per student. So they're not really showcasing the depth and breadth of options available to the young people. So if we're trying to attract people as an industry into apprenticeships or into college or off to university to study the industry, they're not aware of those options because all they're getting fed for by the school is sixth form, sixth form, sixth form. And that's not right for everybody. It's not, I didn't do that route. And I know lots of people in the industry didn't do that route. Not saying that education isn't important because it really is. And, you know, worked in the education system and know the impact it makes on young people. But university is not the only route into the world of work. And that's what we're trying to solve at Inspired, is really trying to get young people and their influencers to look at the full depth and breadth of options available to them and to look at our industry, the hospitality industry, as a career path that they can genuinely take, and it's not a stopgap job until you get yourself a proper job. You know, you don't work in a bar whilst you're at university and then you go and get yourself a proper job at the end. This is a career path that you can take. So that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to get that message across in a passionate, informed way to those young people and to their parents, teachers, careers advisors in the schools at that early age.
And I can imagine that sounds like a huge problem / challenge. So how big would you say the gap is in the real world? You know, what is the perception from you? Because you talk with a lot of young people, I can imagine, and also a lot of stakeholders around the young people.
Yeah, it's getting better. I must admit, it is getting better. There is, and schools now, whilst I've just painted a gloomy picture there, on the more positive side of things, schools are more now open to careers and third-party providers coming in on school property to talk about those options that are available. So it's really important that we are now part of that conversation in hospitality, because if we're not, there are others that are coming in that are filling that gap and filling those ear holes with that their industry is the best and you should come and work in our industry. So we need to be in there and having those conversations with those young people. So schools have to follow a format now called the Gatsby Benchmarks, which is all about careers education from a very early age, from year 7 all the way up to when they leave. And that involves interventions at various different stages. And in each time they are Ofsted inspected, they'll look at their Gatsby benchmarks and see and make sure that students are receiving careers interventions at every point in their school journey. So we need to be ready as an industry and to be in there, because if we're not, like I say, other people will be in there talking about their industry, retail, engineering, tech, the army, and saying, come and work for us. We're the best industry in the world. We're the 3rd largest employer in the UK. We need to be having those conversations with young people and influencing them that hospitality is a worthwhile career option.
And how do you do that then? Is that then you as an organization that goes out and talk with school, or is it really in collaboration with operators this happens?
Yeah. So we're Inspired Community Group, and community is at the heart of our organisation and the heart of what we do. So what we do is we train volunteers from the world of work, so volunteers from hospitality, and with all due respect, Michael, it's not the likes of me and you, because me and you look like and sound like they're teachers. So what we do is we try and get volunteers who are much younger, that have left school within the last 5-6 years, maybe 10 years. So we're looking at supervisors, graduates, apprentices, those that are starting their careers. And what we do is we take them and we give them the training and the confidence and the ability to deliver a powerful presentation into schools. And we do that for a 2-day training program. They come to us, we train them how to do that. They build a presentation. They have the opportunity to present to their peer groups. It's all in a safe environment. They get feedback, and then they are linked to the schools to be able to go out and do that activity in the schools. The other element of that is the careers hubs, which we are building relationships with. So the careers hubs work with the schools in their local area, and they coordinate all the activities in regards to careers with the schools and businesses. So they're acting like our middleman. So we're providing them with the volunteers from the world of work. They're providing the activities from the schools, and then the magic happens in the middle. We've now trained over 50, or by the end of this year, we'd have trained 50 volunteers, 50 motivators from hospitality. And they all go out and do a minimum of 3 activities a year. So we say 2 in school, it's just 1 per academic term. So do 2 per school, 2 per in school. And then the third activity could be in property. So in your hotel, in your restaurant, hosting a VIP day, host the students, get them to do some hands-on activities, etc. So those are the types of the activities we're training the motivators to do. The other job the motivators are tasked with is to act as talent scouts. So when we talk about talent scouts, we often think about Sunday League football and talent scouts from the Premier League football clubs going around looking for the next Wayne Rooney or David Beckham, and nabbing that talent and then putting them through their academies and then, into the first teams. And that's how talent scouts work. We should be doing exactly the same, but for hospitality. We should be going around those schools looking for the next Jamie Oliver, the next Gordon Ramsay, the next general manager of the Ritz, and looking for that talent to get into hospitality and get them on that trajectory into our industry. So that's their job as well, is to be these talent scouts. And I think when you give somebody that role and that responsibility, is that you're not just there because this is a nice thing to do and to showcase the industry to schools and everyone feels nice at the end of it. But actually your job is to be looking and to be recruiting for it into your business as a positive outcome. And it's working, Michael. We've got a number of case studies now from the Richmond Hill Hotel, from Red Carnation Hotels, where they've gone out, they've done the school activities, they've had them in on work experience. From that, they've then employed them as apprenticeships, and then they're working in the industry. So this talent pipeline works. We can't no longer rely on just putting an advert on a jobs board on a website somewhere and hoping that we're going to fill the vacancy from it. The world doesn't work like that anymore. And whilst technology absolutely plays a key point in all of that journey, I'm not saying it doesn't, but these people are being influenced by so many different things outside, in school and outside of school. We need that opportunity to be standing in front of them face to face, talking passionately and positively about our industry and how you can get a job in it, get a career in it, and how it can change your life. So that's the sort of things that we're trying to do. That's the flagship program of what we're doing. The second element of what we're trying to do is to provide high quality careers information, advice and guidance. So we've been able to provide now 2 years worth of a careers guide that is printed and available online that helps young people to follow those career paths. And our motivators take these into schools. We can use them at jobs fairs. I was at Crystal Palace Football Club the other week meeting unemployed people, talking to them about careers in the industry, and took the guides and the magazines. Then there's such a vacuum of information out there that people don't know where to go. And what we do is we signpost people to the relevant resources. So whether that's Springboard Career Scope, whether that's podcasts where they can get more information about the industry, whatever it might be, is it's signposting them where to go. That initial conversation when you're standing in front of somebody going, I'm not too sure what to do, where to go, have you got any information? We've provided this useful guide for them. So that's our second element of what we're trying to do. And then our third element, our third program of work, which is coming down the road, and we haven't developed this yet, but it's part of our strategy, is to work with young people on a mentoring scheme that are at risk of becoming NEET. So at risk of becoming not in education, employment or training. So falling out of that whole education system totally. There's over 500,000 young people who have never experienced work.
Wow.
There's 900,000 vacancies in the UK at the moment. So we just need to marry the two up, surely, would be the simple math. But we all know it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So that is the third program that we're looking at developing in the future, is taking our motivators, taking people from the world of work who really want to, have a real impactful, meaningful change on somebody's life, and get them trained up so they can be a mentor to a young person and divert them away from becoming neat. Because sadly, once you get that label of being a neat and you're out of the employment system, that then produces so many other social impacts, negative social impacts on them, health-wise, confidence, mental health. All of that starts then coming in. We need to intervene in these young people much earlier, and it's easier to cure at the earlier stage. Prevention is better than cure, rather than let these young people drop off the cliff and it then become a bigger problem for society later on. So that's our third program that we're excited about, but not there yet. We haven't quite managed to get that going yet, but we will.
It was like two questions of some really interesting things you were saying there, and one of them, let's hang on to what you just talked about. So we have this new generation. So what is the state of this generation? Because you're talking about people getting that. There's been a lot of talk about a high level of unemployment in especially young people.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it do to these people? Because I think that's really, you talk about some really, really difficult consequences here, mental health, then, universal credit even, you end up in these
Mm-hmm.
systems where when you first are in them, it's like, almost like being in quicksand. It just pulls you
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. I mean, my experience of young people has always been very positive. I'm an enterprise advisor in a school. I'm in schools, weekly basis. And I'm always surprised. I think the media paint a picture of young people in a very negative way. When you spend time with young people in schools and you see some of the amazing work that the teachers do to these. I work closely with a boys' school in Bexley Heath. And they are crying out for male role models, but actually when you give them those role models and people are in there and you actually listen and you spend time with them and you talk to them and you give them a bit of help and guidance, they're lapping it up. This isn't fake news when you're talking to them face to face. They actually are really hanging on to every word that you say, and they listen and they take the guidance on. I think young people get a bad press, and I think young people have always got a bad press. Actually, I remember when I was at school, people was always that was the era. I remember David Cameron talking about yobs and hoodies, and young people getting a bad rap. Then I don't think much has changed in all those years where they're not getting a good press. But actually, when you don't listen to that and you actually go and talk to young people and spend time with them, I think you're always pleasantly surprised about how bright they are, how ambitious they are. And yes, they face a lot of challenges, and yes, life is tough, and they've been through pandemics and etc., and it's not fun for them, but they're resilient, and I think they're more resilient than we give them credit for. And I think we, the business community, has a moral duty to engage with that community, to engage with those young people and give them the opportunities that they so much deserve. And I get very frustrated, Michael, when I go and speak to employers and they go, oh yeah, but they're young people are lazy. They come, they're not ready for world of work. They don't know how to talk. They can't communicate. They're on their phones. And I'm like, but have you actually spent any time with young people? Have you gone in and spoken to them saying, this is what we want you to come like? This is what we want you to dress. These are our expectations. Because they don't get that in school, let's be honest. Schools are flat out delivering everything else society wants them to deliver. So we have a moral duty as a business community to work with those young people and help shape them to be business people of the future and to be future employees. And that surely makes simple sense in my head that we should be doing. Yes, it's expensive to do that in time, money, and resources, but the payback is huge, because once you employ, like Richmond Hill Hotel have done, enthusiastic young people, then it's worth every penny of investment that you've had to make in time and money to do that. And you've then got an employee that's going to be loyal, committed, eager to work, eager to learn. She's going to achieve some great things. And we've now actually got a motivator on our program who was inspired by another one of our motivators when they was at university. A motivator came in, spoke, and was so excited, ended up working in hospitality, and has now volunteered to be a motivator for us to go and do this in schools again. So it that full circle, that's what we want to be happening, surely. And I think that moral compass, that moral duty of helping our children. There's a saying that one of our careers teachers says. It says it takes a community to raise a child and a village to raise a child, and that village is coming together to raise our future children, and we all need to pull in the same direction, I think, on that.
What can I do then, because it all sounds really, really important, and I can really see that human touch you're putting on by going out there, be present, instead of it's not like an online webinar or something. It's the human touch. It's real people. There's actually experience. They're a bit, maybe they are 5-10 years ahead of these people. They can much better relate to that than a more senior director person come and talk about, you know, a job in hospitality, because they, to be honest, lack of touch with frontline is not really doing that anymore. So therefore, that's the reality. That's not your job anymore. It's your job to take care of them. So what can they do? I'm talking about the directors, the decision makers, the investors into hospitality, because this is in all our interests, as you say. First of all, for the industry, but also that, how can hospitality be part of making the world a better place by taking care of our young people that they're going to need to fix all the problems we created.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of problems. So I think, what I'd say to business leaders in hospitality is identify people within your ranks who could volunteer and represent your business to those young people in schools. So if we take Red Carnation Hotels as an example, who we work very closely with, Jonathan Raggett and Liz McGiven there, they've identified that their degree apprentices that are going through their hospitality degree program would be ideal motivators. So we've trained up 10, 11 motivators from them now. And the motivator program is now embedded as part of that training program, that in year 2, they then become motivators. It's a given. It's what they do. So I would say, embed it as part of your culture that, lots of companies now give you 2 days of volunteering as a giving back. Let's have motivator activity as part of those 2 days of giving back. And what better way to give back than going into schools and talking about yourself? It's the easiest thing to do in the world, isn't it? Talk about you, what you do and your job. You're not asking you to go in and present a maths pie theories or anything like that. We're asking you to go in, talk to young people about you and your career and your job, the subject 100% everything on. So that's all we're asking to do. So if the business leaders can identify that, they can get involved. Obviously, if they've got some spare cash, we would love the cash, because that means we can do more, we can train more, and we can reach more schools, we can produce more careers materials, we can get those distributed wider and further and reach more young people that way as well. So it's really just being part of our community, and the community is growing every day. we're getting people that are coming to us, whether they're careers hubs, whether they're employers. We're now getting interest from outside of the hospitality industry to say, oh, this is interesting. Could you do this for our university? Could you do this in construction? So hospitality needs to be quick. I'm from the hospitality sector, and I passionately believe in the industry can do great stuff. But, you got to put your money where your mouth is. If you're not going to commit and do it, then other people are going to fill that space. And that's the challenge hospitality has, is that, we're all fishing from a small pond here that's getting smaller. And we need to have a big, big hook to get our fish into our industry. So we need to act fast. So pick up the phone to be my call.
Yeah, well, it was really very interesting because I was listening to you thinking about, we also have this hook, because we have this, ability in most hospitality businesses, as I see it, can train people to be hospitable, to be very human. And there's like a lack of human touch here in the world as technology. And I think really that is the competitive advantage. And that's where you have to think long term about, as you say, embedded as a part of what you're doing, and not looking at what you're getting in 3 months' time, but what you're getting in 2 years, 3 years' time, 5 years' time. That's that GM potential you had. And actually that's how you need to work with it, and not expect immediate results, but actually the joy in what give these. I was thinking of myself in that age, the responsibility you put on them to go and represent the company and act on your behalf must be, that must be such a great thing for the young people. And that again transmit directly in on their work experience, and thereby or the quality of work. And therefore that's great for directly for the customer experience, operations, or whatever.
Absolutely.
How we angle this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the program is, like I say, it's 2 days. It's really good continuing professional development for the individual. The program has been endorsed by the Institute of Hospitality for its quality. And it's had two endorsements of that. It's gone through it twice. So we know the program's of good quality. It has the IOH endorsement. The feedback has always been excellent from the delegates, always giving us 10 out of 10 from our training. The training was developed by the ex-HR director of the Ritz and the ex-learning development director for Jumeirah, Sally and Joe, and they, working with school, Michael Barry at St Columbus Boys School in Bexley Heath, wrote the motivator program. So from their input, and it really gives them good CPD, continuous professional development. And like you say, that, when you're a young professional, to have that 2 days worth of investment in you from your employer to go on this motivator program, they learn how to give and receive feedback on that training. For example, it's very rarely you get that training outside of, the norm. They learn how to write a presentation, stand up and deliver that presentation. It's a daunting experience. They might be used to giving a team briefing or standing in front of their colleagues, but to stand up in front of strangers, and sometimes we're talking assemblies of 300, 400, 600 young people. They're told to be sat there as well, and we're asking you to go in and be inspiring, engaged, and make them excited about hospitality. That is a daunting task for anybody to try and do. So, but they come out of it raring to go, ready to do it, wanting to take on the challenge, and they love it. They really, really enjoy the motivator activity.
And that's an incredible skill, because I can still remember, it was not before early university, I was really trained in this as well, but how scared I was to present to my own class.
Yeah.
But because I had a teacher that forced us to do that, today I'm in deep debt. I thought it was nonsense at that time. I need to learn about logistics. I need to know about operation. I don't need to learn about this,
Yeah.
That's not really relevant. That's probably, I think it was Warren Buffett that said the best investment he did was personal presentation, presenting to an audience.
Yeah.
And today those skills are so valuable as well. I
Yeah.
totally agree. And that was a bit
100%.
of a side note. I was just hearing what you said, and young people are hungry to learn these things because they know they need to be really good at communicating in a world that
Yeah.
moves faster and faster.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What has been your biggest learning on this journey, Sam, that have changed you, maybe a habit, a belief you had about things the last 5 years?
I think the biggest thing that I was surprised about working with schools was the lack of resources they really do have. And especially around careers, because careers is often seen as the poor relative in schools by the school leadership team. And I'm really lucky. The enterprise advisor for the school that I work with is actually run by the deputy head. So they've put careers at the top of the leadership team in that school. So I'm really lucky that the school that I personally work with are very engaged. But that's not the case in 99% of the other schools that we work with, sadly. And I think that's a crying shame, that because surely young people go to schools to end up in a positive destination. And
Yeah.
that positive destination, one of those outcomes has to be work. Ultimately, whether they go to university or whatever career path they take, is preparing people for life and work. And I think I was really surprised by the lack of resources in schools for that work. So that's why we had to change tack a little bit by working with the careers hubs, because they have the relationships with the schools and the school leadership teams, and supporting the schools through the Gatsby benchmarks and through Ofsted inspections. So it's a bit of carrot and stick that they're having to use with the schools, but it seems to be working. I think from our leadership point of view, I mean, because we're a micro business, I'm not even drawing a salary yet from Inspired, so we're all volunteers majority of the time, is that, you have to put 100% of this into it to get at least 10% back. And I think when we started Inspired, we had some really great ambitions of what we wanted to do. We wanted to be in every school in the country within 5 years. We wanted to, work with every hotel in the country and have a motivator at least in every hotel. And whilst, and that comes from John Reed, John's like, we need that stretch. You need that stretch, you need to
he has big ambitions. Yeah.
He has big ambitions.
For good. Yeah. For good. And he's delivering on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if anybody ever gets a chance to get 5 minutes with John, they will always feel inspired and motivated, absolutely, at the end of it, because his energy and he's what he wants to do for the world of good is great. But I have to manage Inspired in a way which is going to be sustainable. And we could probably reach every school in the UK within 5 years. We could probably do that, but then we'll be done and we would have no money to do anything else. We have to build up to that ambition in a really sustainable and meaningful way. I would rather do quality over quantity. I'd rather work with schools on a quality way rather than just saying we've worked with every school. But with the schools we do work with, we have a meaningful relationship and we're actually able to have results and impact as a result of that. And then that volume will then come as a result of it. But like I say, we're still at these early stages, really. Now I'm back in Inspired full time to be able to develop the business and build that relationship and develop the funding to be able to do more of this work going forward. So I think time, I think patience are things that I'm having to learn. But I love the fact that I can make a decision and do it here and then. Very quick example. I was in the school the other week and there was these posters on the wall all about different industries and they all looked the same. They all were uniform, which is fine, but they was grey and dull and anything from inspiring. And I looked at the hospitality one, took a photo of it, WhatsApped it that evening to our graphic designer and went, do you think we could do better? She was like, 100%, yes, we can. Roll on a week later, we've produced 100 hospitality careers posters. They're going out to schools as a result. And we was able to do it. We had a little bit of funding left over from the Savoy Education Trust. I emailed them and said, would you mind if we spent the surplus funds on this little project? They said, yes, go for it. I think it's a great idea. So we've got 100 posters going out to schools. They're bright, they're colourful, they're infographic, and shows up what the government have produced 100%. But that didn't need a committee. That didn't need to go into a board of directors to ask if that's what we can do. We knew it was the right thing to do, and we done it. And that's what I love about Inspired, is that we can make those decisions quickly and know it's having an impact straight away.
And it's also sometimes these small things that is adding up over time that really
100%.
matters. It doesn't have to be big coordinated strategic events, because small things like this could have a much bigger impact. You don't know yet, but it could have. You never know.
Yeah.
A totally different question, Sam. Since you're from hospitality and food, what is your fondest food memory you've had in your life? What was it, and why was it so good?
So when I was a Springboard, I had a very, very lucky... I was working on a project with the Prince's Trust and Mosman's restaurants called Get Into Cooking. And I spent 2 weeks with Mosman and at the Belfry in London in Knightsbridge. And we were taking disadvantaged young people into Mosman's to learn about cookery for 2 weeks. And I spent 2 weeks at Mosman's, absolutely amazing. And I just started dating my wife, who's now my wife. At the time we wasn't, we was just dating. And as a thank you from Mosman's at the end, they said, would you like to come for dinner at the club at the Belfry? And I was like, oh, wow. Obviously bring somebody, don't just come, it's not a table for one. So I took my girlfriend at the time, and we had the most amazing evening. I can't remember the food, but all I remember was it just blew us away. The food, the wine, the service, being looked after. My parents came and waited outside to give us a lift home. Bless them. They drove all the way to London, waited in the car for us so we didn't have to get a taxi home, and gave us a lift home because they wanted to hear all about it on the way home. Really excited. So that was my fondest food memory. And my poor wife, and then I married my girlfriend, and she's now my wife. And I think she always thought, well, is this what life is going to have in store? Nights at Mosman's with Sam, and unfortunately it's been more like nights at Beefeater and Toby Carvery rather than Mosman's ever since. But we had a taster of the good life at one point. So that was my fondest food memory. Absolutely amazing place.
I love how it was connected with actually people on your career path.
Yeah.
Creating special moments, because this is really what we've been talking about, creating special moments. I love that.
Yeah.
Is there one question, Sam, you wish I'd asked you in this conversation? And what would the question be, and what would you have answered?
I think the only question you haven't really asked me is about how we're funded and how we get our money. So the idea at the moment of way we're going to be funded going forward is to have a balanced portfolio of income. So we've been very lucky that over the last 5 years we've had incredible support from the Savoy Education Trust that funded our pilot program of the motivators and have been able to fund various programs ever since, every year. But we've also going to be expanding that work that we're doing with the Savoy Education Trust. We're partnering with Hospitality Connect and Adrian Ellis, so where they're connecting schools and local hospitality associations to do the work, which is great. We're going to be coming in after them and training the volunteers within the hotels to be motivators to make that whole relationship a lot more sustainable. So that's one area of funding. We are also about to put a big bid into the National Lottery. We're putting funding in applications into the postcode lottery as well. So there'll be that funding from trusts and foundations. The other area is sponsorship. So our careers guide, for example, is now sponsored by industry. So 90% of that magazine is funded by adverts in the magazine. So commercial activity. And then we're all looking at other areas of funding, such as direct partnership opportunities. So employers can buy a whole training program of motivators for their business, or half a program, depending on, different packages for employers to be able to invest, to become community investor into Inspired for a return. So a partnership sort of commercial opportunities for them as well. So a variety of different ways of raising income. I'm not wanting to make this expensive, because I think it's expensive enough at the moment for employers. So that's why we're pushing down the trust and foundation route, and potentially government funding on the NEAT program that I talked about earlier, because there's a big focus on the government at the moment to work with NEETs to get them off of the NEET status and into employment. My argument is we should be looking to prevent them going into that stage anyway. So there will be funding available there as well, as we go forward. So that was the question you didn't ask me is, how's this paid for?
That's a very good question, because there's always somebody that has to pay for the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Where can people find out more, Sam, and connect with you? And if they're interested in any kind of way, where's the best place to go?
So LinkedIn, Sam Coulstock on LinkedIn, Inspired Group on LinkedIn as well. And then our website is inspiredgroup.org.uk, and all the information is on there.
Great. Thank you, Sam, for coming on and share your journey, but more importantly about how we help the future generation unleash their potential. And we have an opportunity as an industry to do it different here, and could harvest some great talent in the future. It's not all doom for our talent pipeline. We just have to go and do something that's different. That means we need to go and deliver the human touch, was what I put here in my notes. And then, of course, I want to thank you, because you always, in the background, been a big supporter of the show. And yes. I know you were a huge fan. And you pitched yourself. You said, if the show is not coming to me, I'm coming to the show, which I really love, because you're doing some really good stuff, you and John, for the world. So thank you for doing that and making our industry better.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael. Much appreciated.